And I'm actually going to talk about the last 80 to 100 years. Those first 1900 years included things like, you had the slide rule, the abacus, the mechanical calculators, things that we don't think of as computers today. As I said, I'm going to talk about the last 80 to 100 because what we know as electronic computers have only been around for 80 years. And I want to tell you the story of how we got there. For example, I don't have to tell any of you about computers, correct? You're walking around with them, in your hands, in your watches, in your cars. I think even my toaster these days has a microprocessor in it. So as I said, I don't have to tell you about computers, but I would like to give you an idea of how we got here. By the way, do you all appreciate the amount of processing power you are holding in your hands with one of these smartphones? There's more processing power in my smartphone here than all of the computers we're going to see today in the Computer History Museum. And we have gotten here in just 80 years. My background, I've been in the computer field for over 60 years now. So I've got to ride a good portion of that. I have fun talking about it because I can relate to most of that stuff back there. I used to work for AT&T Bell Labs in the past. One of the first projects I worked on, the computer took the size of this cafeteria for the processing we did. I have more power on my watch today than we had back there, and that would have been 50 some years ago. But as I said, it's a very interesting story about how we went from that to this to give you an appreciation for the amount of power that you have. Now, I brought my grandkids through here, kind of explain the same thing, and all they've ever seen in their lives are iPads and iPhones. I don't think they really understand what this is. But what I'm really interested in is 50 years from now, when they're bringing their grandkids through something like this, they're going to talk about this as what the old technology. And they're going to tell their grandkids, oh yeah, I could talk to my friends, I could instant message, I could chat with them. And their grandkids are going to probably look at them and say, what? You had to hold it in your hands and you had to touch it? What's going to happen over the next 50? But appreciate how we got to where we are. And as I said, if you look at the progress we've made in the last 80 years, it's a lot. And we're going at some pretty good speeds right now, and think of how much things are going to change. If you got questions or comments, or if you can't hear me, let me know. Anything before we begin, as I said, was there anything that some of you maybe especially came out to see here in the Computer History Museum that I can either point out as we go by or anything? Okay, if not, please follow me. I think as you all came in, you got a map of the Computer History Museum. We have about 20 exhibit areas. I'm going to be talking about 4 or 5. Please go back and see the rest. Everything we have is here on the first floor. We do have a second floor where we have classrooms and auditorium where they hold other events. If you haven't been there already, please go and visit our chatbot display, which is right behind the reception area. That opened up a little bit over a month or so ago. It's got all the stuff. It's got Amika there. She's a animatronic thing you can talk to. She can talk to you in any language. You can ask her a question in any language. She'll respond. She's got facial expressions. Really an interesting exhibit to see.
Such a small camera he's holding, but boy, looks interesting with the microphone, which is much bigger.
Wow. Big turnout today. We're here in exhibit number 2, punch cards. I did want to point out exhibit number 1 right behind you is the first 1900 years of computing history. And I said there you'll see the calculators. I see my old slide rule that I used to use when I was going to school. But we start off here talking with punch cards. Always like to ask the question, how many of you have seen a punch card? Oh, well, that was my second question. How many of you have used them? Okay. How many of you remember, what is it, do not bend, spindle, fold, or mutilate punch cards? Because, I mean, you used to get bills in the mail. And I had a friend of mine who always used to cut out extra holes before he sent it in. But I want to talk about punch cards because this is the basis of when we think about how we do business data processing. This is where it started. To give you a little bit of history about it. Here in the U.S., we hold a census every 10 years because our Constitution says we do. You've got a certain number of seats in the House of Representatives. You go and count the number of people in each state, rank order the states, and give each state a percentage of the seats based on their population. If all you had to do was count the people in the states, that would not have been that complex of a problem. We're talking about 1880. 1880, no computers, no calculators, no telephones, mail service not that great. Everything was done with pencil and paper. So in 1880, I had 50 million people to count. There's a form here. This is the form that the census taker filled out for each person. To take the census, we went through a census in 2020. You probably remember getting some mail that you filled out a form. Maybe you did it online. In 2020, we had 330 million people to count. That whole census was done in 6 months. You had computers that could take that information, correlate it, do all the stuff. In 1880, to count 50 million people, you had a census taker take that form, go knock on every door. They had to visit each and every family. Take down the information, name, age, sex, marital status, how many hours a week you worked, how did you heat your house, what kind of farm you lived on. Because from the census, you get a lot more information than just counting the people. For example, every state, county, city, what's the makeup of my population by age? How many schools do I have to build? What kind of other infrastructure? Where are people going to move to? What's my tax base? All that comes from the census. So now imagine your job. Somehow I'm going to get these 50 million handwritten forms to you. Probably took several months because of mail service. You're sitting at a big desk. Remember, pencil and paper. You're taking each one of those 50 million forms. Oh, male, certain age group, living on this type of farm, this many hours a week. You're doing that by hand. And so about halfway through the 1880 census, about 1885, things were going so well that they determined they may not complete that census before the next one started in 1890. So they held a competition. Looked for some better ways of doing it. Herman Hollerith was one of the people who responded. For those who worked in punch cards, you probably heard of Hollerith code. That's the code. He's the inventor of it. Herman Hollerith had worked for the Census Bureau, plus he had a degree in statistics. He understood the problem they were trying to solve to make it faster. His first innovation was to take the information that was on that handwritten form and put it on a punch card. Makes it easier to handle, and we'll see how it made it easier to process. By the way, here's the size of the punch card used in the 1890 census where this was first used. Notice it's about the same.